Hello, it's Claire here from Sewn by Claire, and today's skill builder is all about the selvage edge. And I was just about to start and cut out some fabric for my skill builders to start and put the samples together, just the sample squares together. And I thought, okay, where do we start with all of this? Where's some of the important information that you might need to know? And as I was lining up my selvage edge, I thought, there we go. You need to know what a selvage edge is in order to be able to orientate your fabric, your pattern pieces onto your fabric correctly. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to start with the selvage edge. So you'll have heard this already, and I'll pop up here the correct spelling of selvage so that when you see it, if you're a visual learner, when you see the word, you'll know what we're talking about rather than trying to understand my accent. I don't think I've got one really, but some people think that they do. Anyway, no waffling today. So selvage edges is when the fabric is manufactured. There's two bound edges, one on either side of the width of the fabric. The fabric is then loaded onto machines that then either print or weave the fabric through it, weave the design, either the colours or the printed fabric through it. And what happens is you've got these two quite rigid edges to your fabric, and we use those to orientate ourselves as to, sometimes we put them together if we're going to cut out two mirrored copies of a pattern piece, and then we can use that to really just to make sure we got things straight for the fabric. Because if we've got things skew-iff a little bit and they're not quite straight, then what we find is that when we're either wearing that garment or we wash it and then wear it, and it can be a cushion cover, it can be anything. If it's sewn off, cut off grain, and then you sew it off grain, it'll always be off grain. Okay, I hope I'm not losing anybody. Let's go back to selvages anyway, because this is what will help us. So a selvage edge, let me just use this piece of fabric here, is a bound edge like this one here. So we can see there's no fraying there at all. So in the manufacturing process, all of those threads have been wrapped around and have gone back the other way in terms of when they've been stitched. The same way, if we had a full width of fabric, you would see that there'd be a similar edge on the other side. Now, sometimes they have writing on them and sometimes they don't. So I've got a selvage edge here, which again has got a little bit of fraying with it, but if I pull at that, that's not going to fray. There's no loose threads at all on there. And if I turn it round the other way, and you look really closely, sometimes you can see some little dots that are there as well, which is where the fabric has been loaded onto pins on rollers, which helps the fabric move through the machine safely and straight. Contrast is on this side here, hopefully you can see that as I just pull at that, there's some threads and those are pulling away. So I know that that isn't my selvage edge on the fabric that I've bought. If you've got a piece of fabric and it's been cut out of the middle of the piece of fabric and you haven't got a bound edge on it, then again you're going to have a real look, get your magnifying glass out or your readers out, and you want to have a look because the threads go either east to west or north to south. And that will also tell us whether we're on straight of grain as well, which is important, but I'll do grain properly in another section. I'm going to get ahead of myself, aren't I? Sorry. So much information that I want to share with you all. So, selvage edges, back to selvage edges. Sometimes they'll have the manufacturer on them, like this one's a Rose and Hubble fabric. And they also generally have these little dots on them. Now, the little dots is a sample of each of the colours that has been used in the manufacture and the printing of this fabric. So I can look at all of these here on the edge and I know that each one of those has been used somewhere in this design. Got another one here for you, which is a very nice fabric by Frou Frou. And this one here has got the similar dots. They don't always have them, sometimes have different shapes, but generally that's what those dots are. So if you're trying to match a thread to your fabric and you want to choose a particular colour, you can actually lay your threads across these dots and just see how good a colour match you've got. Obviously sometimes you can put it against your fabric too. I'm digressing. But a selvage edge is bound, okay, so there's no fraying at all. and that's how we use it. The other thing that we can do is when we're dressmaking, because this is how it's loaded onto the machine, then generally we will lay our pattern pieces in line with the selvage edge. So if you've got a selvage edge, try and preserve it if you can do on your piece of fabric, because if you ever want to know who manufactured this fabric, who manufactures the fabric, and you want to buy some more, if you've still got that, sometimes it'll have a pattern number or a design number on it, and you can then use that as your reference. So try and use the other side of your fabric first, and especially if you're going to have something left, then leave your selvage edge on with the writing on, so that you know what it is that you've actually bought in the past. So grab a few samples of fabric out of your stash. Maybe you've got some fat quarters, maybe you've got some yardage or some meterage of fabrics, and have a little look at them. Get used to having a look at where that selvage edge is, and have a look at the information that you've got on those. Some people do actually cut off the selvage edges when they've finished with that piece of fabric, and they do preserve it, because they can make, there's things called selvage edge pincushions that you can make, and they are decorative, so you can use them for things, but also it's just a good way of you keeping a reference of your fabric, and which ones you've used. But also it's just understanding that a selvage edge is that bound edge, and then how we use that to, when we're laying out our fabric on a table, whether the selvage edges are together, it'll just be a term that you'll hear lots and lots. So if you understand what it is, then hopefully that'll help you. And that's today's skill builder, is all about the selvage edge. Happy stitching, everybody. Have a great day.